All right, here we are, getting going in the runner's workshop. We're here with an awesome show about biomechanics, and we're going to feature something called the Omega Project, which is really cool. So I'm Coach Brock. I love doing this to try and educate and help runners find just new ways to move their running forward, to achieve their highest potential, and hopefully have fun doing it. That's important. And today with biomechanics, do it without getting injured too. So that would be nice. So biomechanics, we're going to get right into it. Biomechanics is what we're talking about is the way we move when we run, right? So you've probably heard it called running form, technique, just running mechanics, things like that. All of it comes down to the mechanical ways in which we move our body. It turns out running is a skill. The way in which we move our bodies requires practice and movement perfection in order to run properly. So some of the things we're going to talk about today are like, how do you improve or even think about biomechanics in terms of your own running and your own training? But before we get into how to do it, because I know that can be confusing, I just want to make sure we're clear on why. Why do we even need to worry about biomechanics? And it comes down to two things. One, running puts a lot of load and stress on our body when we're running. So the more we can do to make our bodies able to handle that load, able to reduce the stress, the less likely we're going to get injured, right? So it's really important. If we want to get fast and be happy runners, we have to be injury-free so that we can run. And biomechanics is going to play a role in that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that perspective of biomechanics, how to make our bodies more resilient and resistant to injury. And then the second thing is speed. We want to run faster, right? So if we're able to move at a faster pace while using the same amount of energy, that's an efficiency gain, and that's something that biomechanics can do for us. If we do make some adjustments to our skilled movements when we run, we may be able to eke out a little more efficiency, which is essentially free speed, right? So another motivating factor of biomechanics is to get faster. I care about both. I care about them both probably equally. Some may favor one more than the other. It doesn't really matter. But it's so important that when I coach an athlete, this is a starting point for us. We always try to get a baseline of an athlete's ability to move while running and walking. Get a baseline assessment so that we can see if there's areas that need to be worked on, or at least we get a baseline so that when we make changes over time, we get to see how an athlete is changing. So something that I find very important, and I work into all my coaching. I also work it into my own training, and it's something that I'm continuously working on, which is why I guess we even got to this thing with the Omega Project. So we'll get to that in a minute. So let me show you, I will show you what I do when I am working with an athlete. How do I assess their movement and biomechanics? But I also want to show you this way to take it a step further, which is something that I recently did. This is a company called the Omega Project down in Wilmington, Delaware. Worked with a guy named Doug Adams who created this technology and was super excited to do it. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute and show you some more on that.
We got three mechanics looking at a bunch of different things, factors that can be contributing to injuries, as well as performance. And it's nice we can get a full 360-degree view. This is an earlier recorded one here, but you can see how running on the treadmill, you're able to really see and get full 360-degree views of what can be really beneficial to know when we match this up with how you move and how your strengths are. Combine this together into a run practice so that you can practice your forms and you can achieve all your running goals.
So I'm going to come back to that in a minute and show you some more on that. Before I get into how I would assess biomechanics, let's go a little bit more into what matters when it comes to biomechanics. So we'll see if this works. I'm going to bring on a friend of mine named Professor Bob. So Dr. Bob, we're really excited to have you.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure, Coach. It all starts with forces, you see. Humans and all life forms on Earth really are constantly subjected to the universal force of gravitation, which of course interacts with other forces from within and surrounding our body. Now, biomechanics is a way to study that interaction of those forces and their effects, the form, the function, and the motion of our bodies. Under gravities and other loads, human movement is achieved through a complex and highly coordinated mechanical interaction between bones, muscles, ligaments, joints within the musculoskeletal system. And it's all controlled by our central nervous system. It's quite amazing, actually.
Oh, yeah, that is amazing. How does that work? I don't really think about coordinating my bones and muscles and ligaments when I run. Should I?
Well, yes and no. There's an incredible amount of neural programming wired into your body that allows you to move without really thinking about how you're moving. The way you're wired, along with the physical characteristics of your body, is going to dictate how you move. Now, if you want to change the way you move, then you're going to need purposeful, deliberate practice to make those changes. Thanks to something called neuroplasticity, we can literally rewire your movement patterns, but it takes repetition. At first, you're going to have to think about it a lot. Then, it'll get a little more automatic, but it still requires regular reinforcement. And eventually, it becomes fully automatic and autonomous.
Awesome. So I can just think and practice my way to better running form.
No, that's only part of it. Actually, your brain ultimately controls your movement patterns, but your body and its physical characteristics are a huge factor as well.
Ah, darn. I guess I can't change the body I have then, huh?
Well, of course you can! Oh, well, sorry, yeah, you can make changes. Everyone is unique and will have unique characteristics that can't be changed, but there are some very important considerations for running movement. Like mobility. Mobility is the ability to actively move your joints through a range of motion during the gait cycle. For running, more mobility isn't necessarily better, but you do need just enough mobility in all your joints to run properly. Many runners do have mobility limitations that cause their brain to find less than optimal ways to run. Our bodies are amazing, we'll find a way to run. But good biomechanics often require us to intervene and make improvements to our mobility, followed by neural retraining to learn how to move with those mobility restrictions removed.
Ah, so you're talking about flexibility, like stretching?
Not just flexibility, actually. Flexibility is the ability to passively move a joint through a range of motion. Mobility is active. Flexibility is just one way mobility can be limited. It can also be possible for joints to be tight from all the wear and tear that we put them through. That's one reason we do dynamic warm-ups before running and working out. It's also possible for joints to get stuck, often because of previous injuries. Now that may require manual therapy or a visit to a professional physical therapist. Finally, the connective tissue around our joints and muscles, called fascia, can become stiff and bound, and that might result in mobility restrictions. That's pretty common, and we address that with massage and self-myofascial release, things like foam rollers, using balls, and other kinds of tissue flossing.
Okay, so there's lots of ways to have mobility limitations, and I guess we need to know what they are before we treat them.
Yes.
So what else can we change in our body?
Well, sure, stability or controlled movement. Just because we can move a joint through a range of motion doesn't mean we can control it through the whole range. We have to control huge loads while running, so any changes in mobility require learning how to use this new motion. There's lots of micro movements inside and around joints that must be refined through proprioceptive training. Well, that brings us back to the brain, of course. The better we sense movements and relay signs through the body, the better we move. Training this requires dynamic stability exercises, and we need to do it in all three planes of running: the vertical motion, side to side, and of course forward and backwards. Now this type of training isn't hard, it just takes focused practice. Combined with removing any mobility limitations, dynamic stability will change our bodies and allow our movement patterns and biomechanics to improve.
Outstanding. I knew there was a reason why we had so many stability exercises on the Runner's Toolkit website. Anything else we can change?
Well, there's a ton of movement changes we can make, and every runner's unique. Some changes are more important than others. It's generally a good idea not to change too much at once. Gradual but continual refinements lead to the best results. And understanding the gait cycle usually helps.
Oh yeah, the gait cycle. I've heard about that. So that's a useful way to break it down, huh?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very useful model. It all starts by breaking down running into stance phase and swing phase. The stance phase is the period where one of your feet is making contact with the ground. The swing phase is when that leg is not touching the ground, when it's swinging forward.
Yeah, okay, that's pretty obvious.
Oh, yes. Well, it can get very detailed if we break down all the dynamic 3D joint movements, muscle activity, elastic support, and the rotation through the kinetic chain that go into making this movement possible. You want me to talk about all that?
No, at least not today. Tell us how the gait cycle can help us at a high level.
Oh, well, let's just say that analyzing the body at 6 different points in the gait cycle make analysis and interventions a lot easier. The first 3 parts are in the stance phase, when the feet are touching the ground. 1 would be the initial contact with the ground. 2 would be mid-stance, when you're right over the center of gravity of your foot. 3 would be the takeoff, or terminal stance. And then the second 3 are part of the swing phase, the initial swing, the mid-swing, and the terminal swing. So looking at how runners are positioning their feet and legs at these 6 different points in the cycle can provide a ton of information about their biomechanics. It's possible to measure joint angles, ground contact times, float times, stride length, and use them to inform a good strategy for practicing movement skill.
Well, thanks. That's really useful. You provided some great information. I think I'll take it from here.
All right, you bet. Be well, coach.
So anytime you want to change a movement, it all starts with the wiring in your body, the nervous system. And fortunately, we do have this thing called neuroplasticity, which allows us to change the way we move and change the way in which our brain controls our movements. But it takes work. So it takes a lot of deliberate practice, focused on the right things, done over and over again, until they can become even remotely unconscious. So at first it's very conscious, it's something you have to be thinking about. Then you start to get more autonomous as time goes, and the more you repeat these patterns, the more they become completely autonomous, to the point where you're able to repeat them over and over in a run, eventually in a race, eventually when you're under strain and stress and fatigue, and that's what you really want. So it's cool that we can change the way in which our brain moves our body. It's also important to know that it does take time and effort, right? Let's go into how I would do a mobility, stability, and biomechanics screen. So this is the low-tech way, but it can be effective. So I do like to look at mobility and stability exercises. I won't go into them all now, but the Runner's Toolkit will soon have a section dedicated to assessments that you can look at for all these different things, in addition to some things around running, fitness, and stuff like that. As far as looking at biomechanics, one useful way is to look at, call it 2D analysis, which is slow motion video capture. So whether it's on a track or on a treadmill, you can capture in high, like 240 frames per second using most cell phones these days, or GoPros, things like that, which allows you to slow it down and really look at what's going on, and it can be super helpful. So this is a video of an athlete I worked at recently, who we're looking at him from the front. So this can be even better probably on a treadmill, but if you're looking at an athlete from the front, you're able to slow it down. So this is about quarter speed, and what I like to do using a program called Technique by Huddle, but there's a lot of other ones, they're just apps on the phone, able to actually kind of rewind, replay, stop, draw arrows and lines, and basically what I'm looking for is combination of things. One, I'm looking at that gait cycle, those 6 points, but I'm also looking at posture. Overall posture of the body is really important, and I'm also looking at what the arms are doing, arm action. Arm action here is pretty good. You see he's moving his arms forward and back, but I'm also looking at what's happening when his foot's striking the ground there. So looking at from the front, the side, and the back can all be very effective, because you can't, in 2D you can't see everything all at once, so you really need to look at it from multiple angles before you can put together the whole picture of what's going on. And that foot strike is really interesting, how he's striking the ground. There's a bit of crossover that's happening, trying to understand whether that crossover is symmetrical or asymmetrical. So I would pour through lots of different videos looking at that to see what's going on. And then that just gives us clues as to what we might focus on when it comes to exercises. I would never tell this athlete to go completely change their form while running. What I would do is give them exercises, give them ways to train those movement skills a little bit, and then hopefully work those into their running slowly, so that it's not a quick change. So that's what it looks like from the front. We can also look at it from the side. Let's let it run here. So from the side, gives you a really good view, and that's about a quarter speed. Then what we'll do is we'll slow it down. So bring them back, slow it down a little bit. Now I'm trying to look at, let's just say we're looking at the leg action. So that's the terminal stance. Then we look at when he lands, that's the landing. Then right there's the mid stance. Then pushing off terminal stance again. All those are really interesting to look at. What angles are happening? How's his foot pointed? What's the shin angle when he strikes? How's his posture when he's in that mid stance right there? Are his hips high and proud, or is he dropping a little bit? I can draw some lines. So all these things really help understand what's going on. And once you see yourself doing this, then it makes it a lot easier to feel it when you're running. And again, it's not like a one-time fix. It takes time. But over time, you are able to improve this through really careful practice. And that's what we're going for. All right, so that's my low-tech way of doing it. Pretty effective, but obviously there's always better ways. And what I want to show you is a better way that I recently found at the Omega Project down in Wilmington, Delaware, as I said. So let me show this video. And
There we go. Alright, so we can look at a bunch of different information from the 3D motion analysis, from general parameters like your cadence, how much you're bouncing up and down, your amount of time you spend on the ground. We can even look at what your foot strike looks like, how far is your foot landing in front of you, are you landing narrower on one side versus the other. And we break it down by each phase of the running to say when your foot hits the ground, when your foot's right underneath of you, right before your foot hits the ground, and when your foot's in the air. And we can look at all different things and see what might be relevant and contributing to injury or pain.
Figured out a few things for me.
Yeah, we did
work on.
Yeah, a couple things here, if we can share it.
Yeah,
right? So we noticed overall very good mechanics. We were nitpicking because we had the ability to look at some things. But when we looked at your movement, we saw that a little stiffness in the ankle. And we found that there's a compensatory pattern to that. We tend to turn the foot out. And we see that could be a contributing factor to that as well. And the knee then goes down to try to get to that. So we're focusing on getting your mobility up there, but we also saw that on the backside of your running, your foot's on the ground for a really long time. So if we can drive that knee and get that foot off the ground a little quicker, that drives the hip a little bit more. And we saw that you're able to normalize your hip flexion side to side, which is really good. And so you made a quick, good change with that. Good student here.
Well, I just got drilled.
Yeah, some other drills, some drills, and some workouts that you can do to follow up with that. Awesome. Yeah, very good.
all right, so what I got out of this was an awesome gait analysis report, 17 pages. Went into all the details we covered during the assessment. Here you can see he also uses the 6 phases of the gait cycle to break things down, which is really useful. Got the outcomes of the mobility and stability assessment, which is great. He also has given me a bunch of specific exercises to work on. And then here are the different measurements, along with where they sit in a range from ideal to less than ideal, and a little bit of commentary. Broken down by each phase, you get specific measurements, you get pictures, really cool stuff. So next time I go and do this, I'm going to have a great baseline to work from of some specific things I try to change, and I can't wait to go back. But let me just give you a couple of recaps from that. So he was able to look at my form in 3 dimensions. That plus the mobility and stability screen gave him some ideas. Now, a couple of those things confirmed something I already knew. I have a mobility issue in my ankle. I compensate for that, and that causes other problems in my gait. I thought I'd worked on it a bit. Apparently not enough, because it's still there. It's still pretty obvious, and it was great to see that, because now I know I have something really not simple, but something I know I can work at and improve, and it will make me faster and more efficient and less likely to get injured. So that's awesome. Also, I learned that, and this is something I didn't quite know, I learned that I can improve my efficiency by getting my leg up off the ground faster, driving my knee forward, reducing my ground contact time. Now, I've looked in videos and I've tried to see if I'm moving my legs through fast enough, and I wasn't sure. I thought maybe it was something I needed to work on. Well, this gave me the numbers. Not only that, when Doug had me go through some drills right there after I went on the treadmill, so I had to go back on the treadmill, look at it again with that kind of programmed into me while I'm focused on it, and I was actually able to see improvements. right there and right then and there, which is really cool. So obviously a machine like this, technology like this can be really useful, and it's the kind of thing that wouldn't be available that many years ago. It would have been prohibitively expensive, but Doug has been able to take advantage of technology improvements and offer this now to recreational runners like us. He's also got pros coming in and working with him, which is really cool. But it's a facility that's available. There's others around the country. I believe he even sells these systems. So something you might want to take advantage of if you can. Now to recap, one thing is that Doug will offer a $50 off your first full gait assessment if you mention that you learned about it through the Runner's Workshop or through Run Express. Run Express, our kind of crew of runners in the Philly area, we're going to partner with him and try to help him out. He'll help us out, and that's pretty cool. Love doing that in the community. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, you should get in touch. Now, this whole video, I'm going to rework a little bit, and I'm going to post a better version, and I'm going to have some notes around contact information, and some more links and things like that. So if you're seeing this live, you might want to come back and look at it again. If you're not seeing it live, hopefully you're already seeing the better version. What else? So the show will continue to improve. Technology is awesome. Sometimes it's hard to manage. So I will get this better, and I will get this firing on all cylinders. You can always go to YouTube, follow there. I'm starting to post these to Facebook on the Run Expression page. And you can always go to runnerstoolkit.com. There's a whole section just for the Runner's Workshop where you can see the archive of every show we've done. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can access exercises, assessments, videos, all kinds of things like that there. So that's the best way to go. And so I'm going to sign off and work on improving some of this video and trying to get that back out so anyone who's interested can see the version that I intended it to be. Thanks. I will be back soon. Have a great holiday. Bye.